Order, order. We start with questions to the Minister for the Cabinet Office, Warinder Juss.
Question number 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I would like to answer questions 1 and 9 together. Since we launched the Plan for Change last month, we've published the Elective Reform Plan to get NHS waiting lists down, and the AI Opportunities Plan to ensure the UK is both a great home for AI investment and that the government makes the most of this technology. The aim of the Plan for Change is to increase living standards, cut NHS waiting lists, boost energy security, give children the best start in life, make our streets safer and build the houses the country needs for the future. And just today, we've announced measures to stop repeated judicial review attempts from holding up major investment projects which are in the national interest.
Warinder Juss.
I thank my right honourable friend for his answer. Does he agree with me that the government's Plan for Change provides my constituents in Wolverhampton West with clear, measurable metrics against which they can hold the government to account, to restore faith in politics and politicians, so that my constituents can see the shorter hospital waiting lists, better living standards, safer streets, better and more housing, and a better start for our children in school?
Secretary.
Well, I thank my honourable friend and parliamentary neighbour for his question. I know his constituents well in Wolverhampton, and I believe he's right that a higher standard of living, lower NHS waiting lists, more housing and children getting a better start of life will be good for his constituents in Wolverhampton and good for constituents right around the country.
Michelle Welsh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Vibrant town centres are so important for the health of our local economies. Under the party opposite, shoplifting was allowed to spiral out of control, and we are still dealing with the consequences. Not too long ago, in Hucknall, a shop worker was brutally attacked. And when I speak to local residents and businesses across Sherwood Forest, they tell me that this kind of antisocial behaviour has meant they do not want to go out into town at night. Can the Minister confirm that the measures announced in the Plan for Change will deliver both safer streets and will be a boost to local economies?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and let me say first of all that I'm very sorry to hear about the distressing attack on the shop worker in my honourable friend's constituency. Everyone should be free to go to work without the fear of being attacked while doing their job. I'm pleased to say that under this government, assaulting a shop worker will be made a separate criminal offence. And my honourable friend is right to say that on top of that, we do need to do more to make sure that our town centres are safe, and restoring community policing with the additional police officers and PCSOs that we plan will enable more confidence for all our constituents to visit their town centres and go about their business with peace and confidence.
Simon Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just by opening, I welcome the announcement today with regards to the proposals for judicial review. But could I ask the Chancellor of the Duchy? The government's Plan for Change is an important endeavour, which of course will not just need cabinet colleagues, but also civil servants to row in behind it. Is he able to tell the House how he is marshalling and coordinating political and official activity to deliver that, and who is going to hold the circle to deliver across government rather than just having it siloed?
Secretary.
Well, I'm grateful to the Chair of the Select Committee, and he points out an important problem. Siloing is a traditional and difficult problem in our system. This is a plan for the whole government, right across government. The Prime Minister has been very clear with the Cabinet that the goals and aims set out in the Plan for Change are key things to deliver over the next few years. That requires a whole-of-government machine, and it requires us to cross the departmental boundaries and make sure that what we're focused on is outcomes for the public rather than the processes which sometimes detain us.
James Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, thank the Minister for that answer. Minister, the high streets have become almost a battlefield when it comes to customers and shopkeepers trying to ensure that their goods aren't stolen and they're not attacked. In Northern Ireland, we have similar problems to what the Minister has outlined and others have said here. Having CCTV in place, having a police force that's receptive and answers quick to the urgent request for assistance. Has the Minister had any chance to talk to the relevant Minister, the Police and Justice Minister in Northern Ireland, to ensure what has been done here can be replicated in Northern Ireland in such a way that we can all gain? Thanks so much.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, not for the first time. The Honourable Gentleman speaks a lot of common sense. Wherever you are in the UK, you want the freedom to go about your business, shopping or work or whatever it is, in peace. We believe that some of the measures he outlined there on CCTV and so on are important. So too is community policing, and I'm very happy to have a positive and constructive dialogue with the administration in Northern Ireland and all the devolved governments on these issues. The powers in these areas are devolved, but I think there's a common interest in protecting the public and making sure that our streets and communities are safe.
Who's the Minister? Mike Wood, Minister Mike Wood.
Mr. Speaker, in recent weeks, in response to written parliamentary questions, the Cabinet Office have refused to commit to updating Parliament on the status of the targets in this plan. They've refused to publish information on the delivery board monitoring. They've refused to have an independent review and audit of the targets. They've refused to publish an annual cost analysis of them. They've refused to publish a risk register of meeting the targets. They've refused to publish an annual report, and they refused to publish a public dashboard. At the same time, ministers have been unable to explain how a whole series of the targets in the plan are to be measured. So can the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster explain to the House, is this a sign that his department is being obstructive and evasive, or that this plan has not been thought through at all beyond the slogans?
Secretary.
I welcome the Honourable Gentleman to his place and for his question. If he wants to know what the targets are, I suggest he reads the plan for change. They're set out very carefully in it. And all those lists of processes that he said, I did say we were focused on outcomes, and that's why today we've announced reform of the judicial review process to stop the repeated and often lengthy and hugely expensive actions which delay important investment projects that are in the national interest. I would have thought when he got to his feet, he would have welcomed that.
Dr. Allison.
Question number 2, Mr. Speaker.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I'd like to answer questions 2 and 6 together. I say to my honourable friend, the battle to ensure protection against cyber attacks is constant and ongoing. I made a speech to the NATO Cyber Defence Conference a couple of months ago and said that this government is taking action to strengthen our cyber security and to protect our digital economy to deliver economic growth. Last week, we announced important proposals to protect UK businesses from ransomware, the most harmful cybercrime, which can often cost a lot of money and do a lot of damage. And these measures will complement the Cyber Security and Resilience Bill, which is being introduced this session, to help make the UK safer from cyber threats.
Tell us some Gardner.
Recognising the critical importance of closing the skills gap across the government and defence sectors to safeguard against emerging threats in this digital age which worry my constituents of Stoke-on-Trent South, may I ask the Minister what plans does the government have to collaborate with organisations like Code First Girls to develop a skilled and inclusive cyber workforce as highlighted in the AI Opportunities Action Plan?
Cabinet Secretary.
I very much welcome her question. The AI Opportunities Action Plan gives us great opportunities and shows how seriously we take this. And I know that organisations such as Code First Girls are doing important work, providing free coding courses for women. I thank them for that. It's really important in pursuing this plan that we have the skilled people to do it. And in government, I'm pleased to say much of the cyber security work is led by outstanding women, and we will want more people with the right skills. So well done to Code First Girls, and we look forward to continuing to work with them.
Kevin Bonavia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my right honourable friend for his earlier answer. Between July 2023 and 2024, over 150 cyber incidents were reported by the local government sector in the UK. And last year, the average ransom demand from a ransomware attack was over £2.2 million. As the local government sector do not pay ransoms, the average cost of recovering from a ransomware attack for a council is approximately £12 million. Therefore, will my right honourable friend look to make additional support available to local authorities to enhance their cybersecurity and protect local services for constituents like mine in Stevenage?
My honourable friend is right to draw attention to the threat to local authorities. This is a whole system threat. It can affect central government, private businesses and local authorities. In October, my colleagues at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government launched the Cyber Assessment Framework for Local Government, which sets a clear standard for the sector. They also provide monthly cyber clinics, and they're supporting local authorities to improve collaboration, share intelligence and tackle common vulnerabilities. There's got to be constant dialogue against this and a constant fight against a growing threat.
Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ministers in this department and in others have been very generous in engaging with my repeated requests for engagement with Cheltenham's cyber security industry, where GCHQ is located, and the NCSC as well. Now, there is increasing evidence that having the private sector and the public sector co-located is really important for our cybersecurity sector. The Golden Valley development provides an opportunity to do that, and the Places for Growth scheme might give an opportunity for more public sector officials to be placed alongside one of our most influential cyber clusters. So I wonder whether ministers might be interested in having a meeting about that.
But not at the expense of Lancashire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've got to congratulate the honourable member for his relentlessness in raising these issues on behalf of his constituency. He's right to draw attention to the assets that we have there in terms of GCHQ, the National Cyber Security Centre. Let me pay tribute to the officials working there. I do think there's a benefit in clusters, in people learning from one another, in being close by, and it all helps contribute to our efforts in this area.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Sarah Olney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Last year, the National Cyber Security Centre, located in my honourable friend's constituency of Cheltenham, said that the government was almost certain that Russian actors had attempted to interfere in the 2019 general election. We are clearly in a new era of politics. Trust in politics is at an all-time low, disinformation is on the rise, and following instances across the world of foreign interference in elections, it is essential that the government makes a plan to address this threat to democracy. It's vital we take all possible steps to restore faith in politics, to strengthen our political system, to boost political engagement at home, and to protect our national democracy from external influences. So I ask the Secretary of State, what steps is he taking to safeguard the democratic processes of the United Kingdom from foreign interference?
Can I thank the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, and I think she makes some very strong points. We do have to take the protection of our democratic system and processes seriously. I outlined in my speech to the NATO Cybersecurity Conference Russian activity when I made that speech a couple of months ago. We've got to guard against it here. We have to help other countries guard against it too. And my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Defence, made it very clear yesterday what we think of Russian interference in our waters, and the same applies in the cybersphere too.
Richard Baker.
Question number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I would like to answer questions 3, 5 and 19 together. The Prime Minister and the President of the European Commission have agreed to strengthen the relationship between the EU and the UK, putting it on a more solid, stable footing. I am taking forward discussions with my EU counterpart, Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič. In 2 weeks' time, the Prime Minister will be attending a summit with fellow European leaders on European defence.
Richard Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister agree with me that the arts, musicians and the wider creative sector play a vital role in our economy, which is why working to negotiate a deal for touring artists is so important? Can the Minister confirm that this is still a priority for him?
Minister.
My honourable friend makes a good point, and I can confirm that our priority remains that ensuring UK artists can continue to perform and promote themselves around the world. That's why the Department for Culture, Media and Sport is working collaboratively with the creative sector and across government to address key issues for our brilliant artists and their support staff touring the EU. As we set out in our manifesto, we will work with the EU and Member States to explore how best to improve these arrangements, but without seeing a return to freedom of movement.
Joe Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm frequently contacted by businesses in my constituency who are deeply concerned about the trade barriers that were put up by the previous government that are really damaging growth in the North East. So can I urge my right honourable friend in the strongest possible terms to prioritise pragmatism in our relations with the EU and to make sure that businesses in my part of the country can get the support they need and export the goods that they manufacture?
Minister.
Yes, my honourable friend raises a really good point. Of course, we set out in our manifesto that we would not return to the single market, we would not return to the customs union, we will not return to freedom of movement. Within that framework, absolutely, we take a pragmatic approach, putting the national interest first to tear down trade barriers wherever we can.
Rachel Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The end of this month will be the anniversary of Brexit, and can the Minister assure me that we will not be returning to the appalling divisions of the past? And does he agree with me that the forthcoming summit and the reset negotiations coming forward are a vital opportunity to be discussing growth, not just for the diverse communities and businesses in my constituency, but for our nation?
Minister.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. This is a time to look to the future, not to go back to the divisions of the past. And the forthcoming EU-UK summit really does present significant opportunities to make people in the UK and indeed the EU more secure, safer and more prosperous.
Sir Christopher Cho.
Mr. Speaker, for more than 15 years, the European Union has been in breach of its international treaty obligations to join the European Convention on Human Rights. What is the government doing to address the arrogance of the European Union on this issue?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, firstly, I would say that this government is committed to our membership of the European Convention on Human Rights. And I would also say to the right honourable gentleman, he talks about bodies, organisations not being in compliance with international treaties. One of the big problems of the past government was the way they signed international treaties and then sought to condemn them afterwards when they themselves had put pen to paper on them. We will not trash Britain's reputation on the international stage as the last government did.
John Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Maros Sefcovic is today dangling the prospect of Britain joining the Pan-European Mediterranean Convention. Of course, the quiet part is that would turn this country once again into rule takers and not rule makers. Ahead of the summit, can he rule out us falling in line with so-called dynamic alignment, in other words, taking EU rules and regulations, and will we instead strike out in the world and do new deals with America and around the Pacific Rim?
Minister.
Well, I don't accept the choice, the binary choice that the honourable gentleman is putting. We want to increase trade, increase exports all around the world. It is hugely important. As the Prime Minister said, we don't choose between allies. We look to deepen all our relationships. On the specific point that he raises, we of course welcome the positive, constructive tone from Commissioner Sefcovic. We're always looking for ways to reduce barriers of trade, but within our manifesto red lines, because we take a pragmatic view as to where the national interest lies. But we don't currently have any plans to join PEM, and we are not going to provide a running commentary on every comment that's made.
Sir Secretary Alex Burker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, yesterday in Davos, Mr. Sefcovic suggested that the UK and the EU were talking about dynamic alignment. And as the Paymaster General will be aware, this is a very significant step if it's true. So will he be clear with the House? Is dynamic alignment on the table?
Minister.
Well, I have to, Mr. Speaker, give the right honourable gentleman top marks for audacity, because I don't know if the party opposite and MPs opposite have heard, but a week ago, the Leader of the Opposition gave her New Year's speech. And I'm sure that those party opposite will know that we listened to it extremely carefully. And do you know what she said about previous EU-UK negotiations under the party opposite? That they were engaging in them before we had a plan for growth outside the EU. Those mistakes were made because we told people what they wanted to hear first and tried to work it out later. So why doesn't the...
I think we're in danger. I'm not going to sit down. Thank you. I'm just in danger. I have a lot of questions to get through, and I think if you're going to make a statement on it, I'd always welcome it in the future. Alex Burkhardt.
Well, I'd welcome it too, Mr. Speaker, because the honourable gentleman was not answering my question, just as he didn't answer the question of my honourable friend behind me, and as my honourable friend from Kingswinford made clear, just as his department is not answering questions of all hue at the moment. It comes to something when Mr. Sefcovic is a better guide to what is going on than the British government. Yet, if the government is committed to dynamic alignment now, he will know that this is a significant step because it potentially brings the European Court back into having jurisdiction over the United Kingdom. So, for the avoidance of doubt, will the right honourable gentleman rule out the ECJ having jurisdiction over the UK in any regard in the future?
Well, I'm astonished by the question because the right honourable gentleman is also the Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, and he will also know the role of the European Court of Justice in the Windsor framework. But to his question about the negotiations, we've set out our red lines in the manifesto. We've set out the examples of things we are seeking to negotiate. That is already there. But finally, I just say to him, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition was apologising last week about the conduct of the party opposite on its relationship with the EU. Why is he not starting with an apology, or did he just not get the memo from his leader?
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Sarah Olney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The wholly inadequate deal with the EU, negotiated by the previous Conservative government, has done enormous damage to British businesses. We've seen soaring import costs, increased workforce shortages, and reams of red tape creating huge barriers to growth. The return of a Trump administration in Washington changes the landscape of trade deals globally with the threat of high tariffs, and will be deeply worrying for many businesses across the country. The UK must lead on the world stage again, standing up for our interests by working closely with our countries, most importantly, our European neighbours, as set out by the leader of the Liberal Democrats in his New Year's speech last week. So I urge the Minister to be more ambitious in rebuilding our relationship with Europe and ask if he will agree with me that the best way to boost growth and fix our relationship with the EU is to agree a new UK-EU customs union.
Come on. I can't do one side, not the other.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the Liberal Democrat spokesperson for the question. But as I indicated in an earlier answer, we do not choose between allies. We are looking to deepen our trade links right around the world with different partners. But of course, she should also be aware, of course, we are ambitious on the UK-EU relationship, and we will take that ambition forward now into the UK-EU summit.
Jen Bottrell.
Question 4, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I will, with your permission, answer questions 4 and 17 together. As an immediate first step in reform, the Government introduced the House of Lords Hereditary Peers Bill to remove the right of hereditary peers to sit and vote in the House of Lords. The bill was passed and amended in this House and will soon enter committee stage in the other place.
Jen Bottrell.
I thank my honourable friend for his answer. I regularly meet talented, hard-working and intelligent young people across Ossett and Denby Dale who often feel detached from politics. How quickly can the government make progress on this legislation so that all young people have an equal chance in making the laws and shaping our future, and not just those born into privilege?
Minister.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and we want to see this bill on the statute book by the end of this session. The role of hereditary peers is completely indefensible in this day and age. Last year, this bill was resoundingly approved by this House. It's currently going through the other place, where it will soon start committee stage. This is a clear manifesto commitment by the Labour Party, and I look forward to it being delivered.
Mark Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer. Being the MP for Leeds South West and Morley is the greatest privilege I could ask for, and constituency boundaries ensure that all parts of our country are represented in this place. The same is not true of the other place, which is not representative of our nations and regions. Can I ask the Minister what work is being done or considered to remedy this, to ensure that all of our communities are represented in the other place?
Well, as the Member of Parliament for the seat I grew up in, I share my honourable friend's passion for representing my area. My honourable friend will be aware of the Government's manifesto commitments to reform the process of appointments to the House of Lords so that it better reflects the country it serves, and we will consult on proposals for alternative second chamber that's more representative of the nations and the regions.
Brendan O'Hara.
I you, Mr Speaker. In 2022, the then shadow leader of the House rightly accused Boris Johnson of abusing the honour system by appointing cronies to the House of Lords, and she promised that an incoming Labour Prime Minister would never do such a thing. Now, having lost her seat at the general election, that former shadow leader of the House is one of 30 new Labour peers waiting to be appointed by the Prime Minister to sit in the House of Lords. So could the Minister explain how the Labour Party stuffing the House of Lords with its cronies is any less of an affront to democracy than when the Tories did it?
I don't think the honourable gentleman can seriously compare the appointments that we've put forward to what happened under the party opposite. But what I would say to the honourable gentleman is we have already set out that now each and every appointment will be accompanied by a citation indicating the experience we brought to the upper house, and the people he is referring to will make an excellent contribution there.
John Glenn.
Question number 7, sir.
With your permission, Mr Speaker, I would like to answer questions 7, 10, 11 and 21 together. The Infected Blood Compensation Authority made the first compensation offers to 11 people with a total value of more than £13 million. The Government has also paid over £1 billion in interim compensation, and in the budget we announced £11.8 billion of funding for the scheme. Yesterday I visited the Infected Blood Compensation Authority office in Newcastle and was assured to see the progress that's being made swiftly and compassionately.
John Glenn.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for his update to the House, and I note the press release that went out yesterday, and no doubt there'll be another one on the 5th of March, the day before the next Cabinet Office questions. But I do want to be constructive in my approach to this, and I should too be visiting the Infected Blood Compensation Authority in Newcastle next Thursday. There do remain, however, a number of concerns from the legal representatives of the complex web of stakeholders in the affected blood and the affected communities around the status of the arm's length body, the appeals process, the role of victims in the oversight board. I am, in my mind, absolutely clear that the Infected Blood Compensation Authority does have the authority and will work through those issues. And I urge the Minister to work with the victims' representatives to assure them so that the lawyers can be more constructive in supporting these people through this difficult pathway. No doubt colleagues will come in with more questions, but does he agree with me? We need to move forward in a constructive manner.
Yes, the right honourable gentleman is absolutely right, and I say to the former Paymaster General that I will look forward to his reflections after his visit next week. But I should also say that I was delighted yesterday to meet the user consultants, who are 3 victims, 2 infected, 1 affected, who are certainly making their voice heard at the Infected Blood Compensation Authority. That voice of victims is hugely important, as is the constructive approach that he's indicated.
Jessica Toll.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I welcome the £11.8 billion allocated in this budget for the infected blood scandal? It is a clear commitment that this government is showing to acting on this injustice. However, parents and partners of the infected, including in my constituency Bournemouth West, are rightly apprehensive about when they will receive compensation, with many being elderly or in poor health. So given the urgency of the situation, can the Minister outline when they may receive compensation and whether he would consider including them in initial waves?
Well, in October, Mr Speaker, applications opened for eligible estates to claim interim compensation payments of £100,000. So far, over 230 estates have received payments. I hope those are welcomed as the beginning of providing recognition for those who lost loved ones to this devastating scandal. The delivery of compensation payments is rightly a matter for IBCO, which is an independent arm's-length body chaired by Sir Robert Francis. The Government expects payments to eligible affected people to begin this year, following a second set of regulations which I'll be laying before Parliament in the coming weeks.
Gregor Point.
Mr Speaker, I don't imagine there's one MP in this House that hasn't had a constituent come and talk to them about this infected blood scandal. In fact, this week I was speaking to one such of my constituents, Linda Cannon, who told me her story, saying, "I lost my husband Billy in February 2013 to hepatitis C after blood transfusion in 1986 for a stomach ulcer at Bangor Hospital. He was not informed until 2011 that he'd been infected, only finding out after presenting with a sore back. He underwent severe treatment without success, which will live with me forever. Life has been difficult to deal with and the consequences of this have been completely devastating to our family. Now, Mr Cannon won't see justice, but several of my other constituents must. And I welcome the urgency in which this government has moved forward with this issue, because justice for the victims of this injustice has been long overdue. Can the Minister therefore update the House how he's been working, not just in England, but across Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland too, to make sure that payments get to those needed immediately?
Mr Speaker, I think the whole House will be moved by the story of my honourable friend's constituent, and it's a story that many of us across the House will be hearing from our constituents about this appalling scandal. I am pleased that first payments have been made to people who have waited far too long for compensation, with first payments being made by the end of 2024 as I committed to this House. But I also commit specifically to the honourable gentleman, I do work very closely with the devolved administrations to ensure that victims all across the United Kingdom can achieve justice.
Lee Jarvis.
Mr Speaker. The victims of the infected blood scandal, including those from my constituency who attended Trelaws College in Hampshire, have been fighting for justice for decades and have raised deep concerns about the slow progress of compensation payments. With the Infected Blood Compensation Authority projecting that by the end of March, just 250 people will have been offered compensation, will the government accelerate the rollout of the compensation scheme to ensure that victims see justice within their lifetimes?
Minister.
Just to say to the House, I am restless for progress in terms of speed of payments, and everything that I can do within my gift as a Minister in terms of speed of putting regulations before this House, I will do. IBCA obviously is operationally independent, but I would say, I was having this discussion yesterday up in Newcastle, the test and learn approach that they're using, which is starting with this smaller number, a representative sample of cases, will allow them to ramp up delivery. And when I was in Newcastle yesterday, I saw a group of public servants working efficiently in a compassionate way to deliver.
Joe Roberts.
Number 8, please, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Across all our work, this government is determined to deliver better value for money for taxpayers. That is why, Mr Speaker, shortly after we came to office, this government scrapped the party opposite's VIP helicopter service, which was a grossly wasteful symbol of a government that was totally out of touch with the problems facing the rest of the country. Under this government, ministers must ensure they always make efficient and cost-effective travel arrangements, which the government publishes on gov.uk.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Minister refers to helicopter travel, and she has made her description of the previous government. But doesn't she agree that the government is actually using VIP helicopter travel, but not through the Ministry of Defence budget, but through the Cabinet Office budget? And doesn't that make this government grossly hypocritical and a symbol of how out of touch they are with the British public?
Minister.
Under the last government, the former Prime Minister would take the helicopters for short journeys at huge waste to the taxpayer. The Prime Minister's and ministerial travel under this government is always decided with consideration to the most efficient and best use of time, and crucially in the interests of the taxpayer.
Alistair Carmichael.
Number 12, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, I engage with a range of stakeholders relevant to our relationship with the EU. For example, through the Trade and Cooperation Agreements Domestic Advisory Group, which I last met in September, which includes representatives of the UK fishing industry. DEFRA are the responsible department with ongoing dialogue with the industry. I recently met with my honourable friend, the Food Security and Rural Affairs Minister, to discuss fisheries matters, and I will be meeting with representatives of the Scottish fishing industry in the very near future to discuss their interests in our fisheries relationship with the EU under the Trade and Cooperation Agreement.
Mr Carmichael.
I'm delighted to hear that these meetings are scheduled, Mr Speaker, because the review of the TCA is seen by fishing industries around the UK as being the opportunity to undo some of the damage that was done by Boris Johnson at the end of the Brexit negotiations. I met the EU Commission official who will be leading their side in the negotiations. It's clear that she is informed of their industry's priorities and she has a plan for achieving them. They see this as an important piece of work. The Minister can only do what needs to be done if he's prepared to engage with and to listen to the views of our fishing industries and fishing communities.
Minister.
Look, I understand and recognise the very strong interest in what happens in 2026 when the arrangements that were negotiated by the previous government end. And of course, what I would say to him is that I will listen, I will engage, we will protect the interests of our fishers, and we will also fulfil our international commitments to protect the marine environment.
Dr. Becky Cooper.
Question 13, please, Mr. Speaker.
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I set out in a speech last month, modern government is not just about what the government wants to do, but also reform of the state itself. We want to see public services that revolve around the needs of service users, that use new technology in the best way possible to secure value for money and better outcomes for our citizens. And we've launched a number of test and learn projects with local authority areas to get better results on difficult issues like temporary accommodation. And just this week we announced we will launch a new gov.uk app in June, which will be a step change in fast and easy public access to government services.
Dr. Becky Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for those comments. How will the Minister ensure that tackling health inequalities is baked into public service reforms, devolution agreements and local growth plans?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the heart of what we want to do is to improve living standards, outcomes and opportunities for all. And one of the consequences of the long waiting times and waiting lists we've seen in the NHS in recent years is that it has been tougher on those who simply can't afford to pay. So it's in the interests of good health and of equal access to put the investment in that was announced by the Chancellor in the budget and is being taken forward by the plans announced by my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Health.
Lee Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reformed public services and the reliance on artificial intelligence to deliver that led DEFRA to pilot Microsoft Copilot programme. However, that pilot ended after 6 months, yet it demonstrated transformative improvements in departmental efficiency and was particularly beneficial, Mr. Speaker, for disabled and neurodivergent staff. So could the Minister confirm if funding for this tool, which has been suspended till 2026, could be released so that staff could benefit from its application?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable gentleman is quite right to point out the advantages that can come from these things. I'm reluctant to make specific announcements on funding on specific projects, but what I can say to him is that the government is determined not only to make the UK a good home for investment in AI, which is going to be huge around the world in the coming years, but also to make best possible use of it in the delivery of public services, which we believe can get good value for money and better outcomes for the public. The road will not always be easy. There will be things that go wrong, but frankly, with our tradition of creativity and innovation, we want to grasp this technology and make best use of it.
Daniel France.
Question 14, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday this government announced ambitious new legislation to take action on fraud, updating DWP's powers for the first time in 20 years and introducing new powers to take on high-value fraud across the wider public sector. At the budget, the Chancellor announced the biggest welfare frauds and error budget in recent history. Under the last government, fraud spiralled out of control, but we're determined to protect every pound of taxpayers' money.
Dale France.
Can I thank my honourable friend for her answer? One of the biggest scandals we saw under the last Conservative government was ministers giving out dodgy COVID contracts to their friends and donors. Yeah. Can the Minister update the House on what steps the government is taking to ensure there will never again be a repeat of this shameful behaviour and that where the public has been defrauded, we will get our money back?
Yeah. Minister.
As a local government leader during the pandemic, my right honourable friend will know how hard things were for communities, the sacrifices that were made, the people who risked their lives to keep the rest of us safe. And he will share my anger at those who use the national crisis to steal billions from the taxpayer. We will take action on this, where the last government failed. The Public Authorities Fraud, Error and Recovery Bill, introduced yesterday, gives the government tough new powers that can be used to investigate and recover money stolen from the public, and doubles the time we have to bring those fraudsters to justice.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 15.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, under this government, public procurement will be laser-focused on delivering our missions and value for money for the taxpayer. A new Procurement Act commences in February 2025, creating a simpler, more flexible procurement regime and underpinned by a new mission-led national procurement policy statement. I really welcome the wide interest from members from across the House in this work, and from so many small businesses, social enterprises, voluntary sector organisations, and I look forward to bringing the MPPS forward to support SMEs, tackle waste and deliver on our missions.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm so pleased to hear about the National Procurement Policy Statement next month. As well as encouraging buying British, there are huge opportunities to use procurement to encourage growth and local supply chains, such as floating offshore wind in Cornwall, as well as other industries. Could the Minister confirm there will be a bold procurement policy which will ensure we deliver economic growth in every corner of our country, even as far down as Cornwall?
Mr. Speaker, I really welcomed the conversation I had with my right honourable friend last week, who talked me through the importance of SMEs to growth in Truro and Falmouth. A lot of the conversations I've had with small businesses say the same thing. It can be very complex to bid for government contracts, that it's too slow, that sometimes those contracts come out too late, and that sometimes they just can't get on the playing field. We have listened very carefully to what you and my honourable friend and the Speaker has to say on these issues, and we will be bringing forward an MPPS that delivers for SMEs.
Yeah. Richard Holden, Shadow Minister.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. The Treasury Select Committee has unbelievably already raised concerns about the Office for Value for Money, citing issues around its remit, cost, cross-government duplication, amongst other areas, which could concisely be expressed as fears around value for money of Labour's new Office for Value for Money. Does the Minister agree with the financial markets, who don't believe this government's commitment to either reform of public procurement or to prudent financial management, which is why they've added a Reeves ratio to the UK government's debt, costing taxpayers an extra £10 billion a year?
Yeah. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the NAO set out a report about the almost £50 billion gap in maintenance on buildings, and that is the legacy the last government left us. Crumbling buildings, 15 years of lost wage growth, stalled productivity, and Mr. Speaker, compare that to the record just in the last 6 months of this government. 63 billion investment at the UK Investment Summit, leading the way on AI. The IMF upgraded our growth to the fastest in Europe. My honourable friends might want to run down this country, but we are determined to grow our economy.
Right, let's just go to Topicals with Sir David Davies.
Number one, sir.
Cabinet Secretary.
Since the last session of Cabinet Office questions, we've set out the Government's approach on public sector reform, published our response to Module 1 of the COVID-19 inquiry, an updated National Risk Register, and launched our AI Opportunities Plan. And just yesterday, alongside the Department for Work and Pensions, we introduced new legislation to deliver the biggest fraud crackdown in a generation, with greater powers for the Cabinet Office's Public Sector Fraud Authority to retrieve some of the money that was lost during the last administration.
David.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government's quite properly this week been talking about applying AI to improve efficiency and effectiveness across Whitehall. Now, when a human civil servant makes a decision, let's say an HMRC or DWP, and they make a mistake and it's challenged, they can explain their logic and explain how they came to the decision. We know the courts always believe computers are best, give the right answer. But AIs make mistakes, huge mistakes sometimes, And because of the way they're programmed, you can't explain how they got the decision. How is the government going to ensure the appeal process continues to work and we don't have a high-tech version of the post office scandal?
Did it write this question? Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the right honourable gentleman raises an important issue. The Horizon scandal shows that blind faith in a computer system used in the court of law can lead to injustices, and we're seeing that playing out in the public inquiry. I do believe in the possibilities of AI, but it's also important to keep the human element at all times. I think it will enhance human productivity and not replace it, and that's the way we should go.
Antonia Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government was elected on a promise to buy, make and sell more in Britain. What action is she taking to prioritise UK manufacturing products and UK-made steel in public procurement in energy and defence products on national security grounds as allowed by the WTO?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really welcome the recent conversation with my right honourable friend on this really important matter. The government's industrial strategy outlines the importance of manufacturing and defence industry to economic growth and national security. The new National Procurement Policy Statement will put growth at the heart of procurement, and it will align to our industrial strategy.
So the Secretary, Alex Burkhardt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster if he would update the House on the work that the Cabinet Office is doing to prepare for the possibility of an outbreak of foot and mouth, given the news from Germany.
Secretary.
I'm grateful to the Shadow Minister for this question. Those of us of a certain age will remember the appalling consequences of the last serious outbreak of foot and mouth in the UK over 20 years ago. And let me say very clearly from this dispatch box that we are taking this with utmost seriousness. I met with Cobra officials yesterday. I've asked for several briefings since the outbreak in Germany. My colleagues at DEFRA at a ministerial and official level are taking this very seriously. We know the threat that such an outbreak would pose to our farming communities. We want to work with farmers, do everything we possibly can to protect farmers from this. And I can say that so far there has been no outbreak in the UK, but we will...
Order, please. This is a very important subject. I totally agree. The trouble is, topicals, I've got to get a lot of members in. What I would suggest, as it's so important, I would always welcome a statement on Monday. Alex Burkhardt.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for his reply. Please could he assure me that he is speaking to interested parties in Northern Ireland, given the fact that Northern Ireland is so closely connected to Ireland, which is part of the EU, and consequently farmers there are very concerned that they may be affected by any spread of the disease. So please will he assure me that he is undertaking that work?
I'll keep it short, Mr. Speaker, and say that we will make sure that we coordinate our response with all parts of the UK.
Alice MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Labour-led City Council in Norwich was recently awarded £34 million in government funding to help unlock affordable homes and jobs at Anglia Square. This is long overdue and will bring huge benefit to Norwich. It's also a brilliant example of the government's mission for growth as part of our plan for change. Can the Minister update us on broader cross-government plans to deliver the affordable housing needed across the country?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her question. She has been a brilliant champion for more affordable housing in her constituency. Through our plan for change, we've committed to building 1.5 million homes this Parliament, the biggest increase in affordable housing in a generation, which will benefit families in Norwich and across the country. I'm very pleased to hear about the plans at Anglia Square. This is a powerful example of what can be achieved when a Labour Council works with a Labour government.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Over 170 tonnes of illegal meat products have been seized at the port of Dover since 2022. Given the biosecurity threat, African swine fever and foot and mouth disease posed to over 800 farms in Glastonbury and Somerton, alongside thousands of others up and down the country, what steps is the Minister taking alongside Cabinet colleagues to ensure national security and protect British agriculture? And I'm sure that her statement would be very welcome.
Mr Speaker, I thank her for her question. As I said in response to the opposition spokesperson, we take this threat of foot and mouth in particular very seriously. We want to protect our farmers, we want to work with our farmers. This is a matter of national security, and it's also a matter of making sure that great British farming is not affected by the outbreak that we've seen in Germany.
Gregory Poynton. Gregor.
Mr Speaker, under the SNP, every public service in Scotland is straining under 18 years of mismanagement, with Scots paying more for less. Now, due to decisions taken by this UK Government, the Scottish Government has the largest budgeted settlement in the history of devolution. But does the Minister agree with me that more money doesn't solve all the problems in Scottish public services, and we need a programme of reform too? So given the UK Labour Government is instituting a comprehensive programme of reform, would he share those learnings with the Scottish Government in order that we can reform our public services too?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My honourable friend is absolutely right to draw attention to the increased funding for the devolved government in Scotland as a result of the budget. We are putting more money into the NHS in England, and he's also right to say that when we ask the taxpayer to pay more, that should also come with reform. My right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Health, has been clear about that, and I hope it applies elsewhere too.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Defence said recently that he would reduce the number of permanent civil servants at the MOD by 10% by the end of this Parliament. Will the Cabinet Office be larger or smaller at the end of this Parliament?
Mr Speaker, the right honourable gentleman has perhaps not been paying attention. We announced a programme to reduce the number of civil servants in the Cabinet Office just before Christmas.
Emily Darlington.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. So innovation lies at the heart of our 5 missions. I'd like to ask the Minister about her reflections in seeing innovation when she visited Milton Keynes recently, and how we can take those forward across the country.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, it's wonderful to visit Milton Keynes and to see the work of a pioneering Labour Council. The work that the Labour Council have led to open up services to the NHS, a real example of the shift to community this government is committed to. Milton Keynes has shown when a wonderful MP works with a Labour Council and the NHS that amazing things can happen.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With impending decisions on airport expansions across the south of England, communities in Harpenden and Berkhamsted, including Flamstead and Margate, are very worried about that, not only because the evidence about economic growth is quite low, but also because Climate Change Committee have said that the impact on the climate would be rather large. So can the Minister assure the House that the Government will be listening to the Government's own advisers to have a UK-wide capacity management framework before any airport expansion?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the honourable member for her question. There's been a lot of speculation in recent days, Mr Speaker. I would advise the whole House to not comment on speculation, and if there's an announcement to be made, it will be made.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Travelling and working abroad can be an incredibly enriching experience, and I welcome the Government steps to strengthen our relationship with the EU. But my young constituents would like to know specifically what steps are being taken to increase their opportunities in Europe. So can the Minister tell us what discussions they've had with Cabinet colleagues and EU counterparts regarding an EU youth mobility scheme and any other further actions that are being taken to ease work and travel for young people in Europe?
Minister.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for the question. Clearly we have arrangements with France making school trips easier, and I think we would agree across the House that school trips are really enriching experience. We have obviously the Learning Assistance Scheme that the Department for Education works with the British Council on, of which this government obviously is hugely supportive and wants to drive forward. With regard to a youth mobility scheme, I'm not going to give a running commentary on that. But what I would say, of course, Mr Speaker, is we will always act in the UK's national interest. We will not go back to freedom of movement.
Mr Speaker, how much longer will it be before we get an answer from the government on the review into the vaccine damage payment scheme? That was initiated when my right honourable friend, the member for Tatton, was at the Cabinet Office about a year ago. When are we going to get an answer?
Secretary.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Health, has met with colleagues about this. We believe the vaccine programme had great benefits for the UK, but of course there is a compensation scheme in place for those cases where that was not the case.
Colin Anderson.
Speaker, earlier this month the Chancellor rightly went to China to put UK-China relations on a more pragmatic footing, but can my right honourable friend update the House on what assessment he has made of the National Security and Investment Act to ensure that it remains fit for purpose in safeguarding the UK's economic and national security as we cultivate new commercial links?
Secretary.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Chancellor was right to go to China. It's an important economic relationship, but there is also a security aspect too. The National Security and Investment Act has an important role to play in this, and it is there to safeguard critical areas of the economy. We keep it under regular review, and we will approach this relationship keeping both security and the economic interests of the country in mind.
Dr Ray Timble.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. 2 weeks ago, my constituency of Penistone and Stocksbridge was hit by the worst snow in 15 years, leaving vulnerable and older residents, schools and GP surgeries blocked in by the snow. I commend Barnsley Council staff whose team were out 24 hours a day, 8 days a week solid, because of resources being stretched, their gritters can only cover the Council's primary and secondary roads. Does the Minister agree with me that much more should be done to improve national resilience in extreme and exceptional circumstances where snow is prolonged by cold temperatures, through giving local authorities covering rural areas like mine increased gritting resources and access to snowploughs?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I want to thank my honourable friend for the work she did to support constituents during the heavy snowfall, and I also would like to thank Barnsley Council and other sponsors for their work on this. This responsibility relies within local authorities, but I know that my colleagues in the Cabinet Office, Department for Transport and MHLD are keen for authorities to receive as much support as possible. MHCLG will be in close contact with local resilience forums to see what support they need.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I ask the Paymaster General what progress is being made in improving engagement with those infected and affected by the contaminated blood scandal? Because he is aware that there's been a great deal of concern amongst those people and the organisations that represent them. And can I urge you to sit down with these opposite number in a Department of Health who are responsible for getting aid to the organisations that support those people who are infected and affected, because they are desperately in need of the resources.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'll be carrying out another round of engagement with victims next week, and as I said in answer to the former Paymaster General, the role of user consultants in IBCA is vital as well.
In Library.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. There's still, sadly, 2 victims of the contaminated blood scandal dying on a weekly basis. Will my honourable friend say what is actually preventing the government from instructing IBCA to issue core payments today to all living infected victims registered on the existing support schemes?
IBCA is operationally independent, but I expect and have said I expect the first payments will be affected to be made before the end of this year, and I am restless for progress and will do all I can as a Minister to drive this forward.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Public sector procurement is a fantastic way to drive productivity, innovation and local value into public services. But too often, small businesses, start-ups and voluntary service providers in Newcastle tell me they have difficulty accessing public sector contracts. They don't have as many lawyers or consultants or project managers as bigger businesses. So what steps are you is the Minister taking to ensure better access for public sector?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I have heard very similar things from the SMEs I've been talking to around the country, and we are bringing forward a new national procurement policy statement that will put SMEs right at the heart of government procurement policies.
Final question, Joe Powell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Open end-to-end procurement data could be a goldmine for mission-driven government and, as the CMA warned recently, could make bid rigging harder. Can the government explain how we'll grasp this opportunity of open end-to-end procurement data?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've met the CMA about this really critical issue of bid rigging, and this is something that the government is looking into. More broadly, the new Procurement Act and the new National Procurement Policy Statement puts transparency and openness at the heart of our strategy, and including a new online portal which will make it much easier to see upcoming bids.
That completes questions. Let the front bench change over.